Welcome back to Ultimate Spider-Man Saturdays. It's time to kick off Volume 11. And in our last video, Peter once again fought against Dr. Otto Octavius, who managed to escape prison with the help of his mechanical arms. With Peter stomping Otto and Nick Fury finally destroying the arms, Peter went back to living his normal teenage life. However, upon going home, Gwen Stacy learned of Peter's secret, but ultimately accepted that Peter is doing what he can to make the world a better place. It was a rainy night in New York as Peter swings through the city following a group of police cars that are responding to a hostage situation. He says that he's collecting water in places that he didn't even know he had. Actually, that's not true. He did fight a man made out of sand, and then he had sand in the very same places. As Peter and the police arrive on the scene at the museum, Captain Jean DeWolf calls over the speaker that it is very important that he does not hurt anyone inside, and if he does, their deal is off. The voice of the gladiator shouts, "Free Nurhachi, or the blood will fill the streets!" And Jean asks, "Who?" Gladiator shouts that Nurhachi will be given freedom or everyone who hears him will die! And he crushes the phone. Peter appears behind him telling him that he should really pick on someone his own size, and as Gladiator turns back towering over him, Peter says, "Stay right here, I will go get someone that is your size." Gladiator then pops blades out of his gauntlet, stating that the Emperor has given the signal. They shall battle for Nurhachi! Peter asks how many voices are rattling around in there, and then his spider sense goes off. The blades from Gladiator's gauntlets shoot out, and Peter jumps out of the way onto Gladiator's shoulder, bashing him in the head. Before Peter can even do more damage though, the blades spring out of Gladiator's shoulders, and before Peter can jump away, Gladiator grabs him by the leg. With a powerful swing, he slams Peter down into a display, and he pops on more blades. The blades start slicing at Peter's stomach and leg, and just as Gladiator moves into attack, Peter webs up Gladiator's face and cracks a metal stand across his head. He then continues to bash the stand down on Gladiator when the police charge in, shouting for everyone to get down. Peter looks up stating, "Look, I'm kind of leaking here from the rain, so I'm just gonna go." But one of the officers shouts, "You're not going anywhere!" As Jean steps in telling everyone to lower their guns, Peter says that he's real sorry, cop person lady. He's allergic to jail, and he's gonna be on his way. He quickly jumps over the police, still suffering from his wounds, and he turns to the only doctor that he knows, Curtis Connors. As Dr. Kurt Connors enters his lab from a night of not being able to sleep well, he sees Peter's shadow and he asks what he's doing here. Peter tells him that he once said he owes him, right? Well, he is a doctor and he just needs to borrow the doctor part. Curtis tells him that he's not that type of doctor and that he should really go to an actual hospital, but Peter tells him, "Sure, just let me go get my insurance and that's my other costume." But as he says that, he begins to cough. So Curtis starts stitching up Peter and he continues to cough. So Kurt says that he really needs to not be running around in the rain in his underwear. He doesn't look so good. Peter coughs, telling him, "Yeah, you don't look so great either." And Kurt says, "Well, yeah, I couldn't sleep. I was just going through some adult stuff." Peter jokes, telling him, "At least you're not the lizard, right?" But after seeing Kurt's scowl, he says it was a joke. Once Kurt is finished, he tells Peter that he should probably drive home, but Peter says it's alright, he can get there much faster by web. So he hands him a sweatshirt, telling him to at least take this. He then asks if there's anything that he can do to help with whatever is going on. Any miracle scientific breakthroughs on him? Peter looks back and smiles and says that he is the scientific miracle. But adios, muchachos! As Peter heads out, Kurt begins cleaning up the examination table, stating that he's just going to rip those stitches out again, and then he notices the blood on the table. Being a man of science, Kurt takes a sample of Peter's blood and he examines it, and he smiles. The next day at Kurt's lab, Kurt's assistant Ben Riley arrives in the lab to find Kurt sleeping in his desk. Seeing that Kurt had some experiments going on, Ben goes to look in the microscope and he sees Peter's sample, his eyes wide and stating, "Wow." And then Kurt jumps up shouting gibberish. Ben calms him down, telling him that he just fell asleep at his desk again, he really needs to stop doing that, and then Ben asks, "What is on that slide that he was looking at? It's amazing." Kurt jumps up shouting, "Well, that was nothing, but it's just the beginning of something. But please, don't ask me about it. It's not ready to be shown." Meanwhile, back at the Parker home, Peter is staying home recovering from his recent wounds, and now he's got a cold. As he flips through the morning TV shows, he asks, "Is this really what people... Oh, Bikini Girl!" And then he lays there, and the phone rings. Kurt asks if they can talk, it's really important, and Peter tells him actually he stayed home from school because he isn't feeling well. And Kurt says that's fine, he can come there, but they really need to meet, it's really important. So Peter sighs, telling him, "No, I'll just meet you." A short while later, over at the coffee shop, Peter tells Kurt that he's like 4 minutes away from a coma, so whatever it is, better be important. Kurt says that now he doesn't want him to be mad or anything, but the other night there was some blood left. And Peter stares at him. "What did you do?" Kurt assures him he did nothing. All he did was look at it. And then Peter asks, "Oh God, am I gonna be okay then? Am I gonna die?" And Kurt laughs, telling him, "No, actually what I saw was amazing." He holds out a notebook with a diagram of a normal person's DNA compared to Peter's, and he says that whatever made him become him is an amazing scientific find. That's why he wanted to ask him that with his permission, could he run some experiments on the sample. Kurt goes on saying that something happened on a genetic level and it's possible to use that sample to help others. Things like gene therapy, stem cell research, cures to illnesses, fight diseases, and Peter adds cancer. He then says that his father, before he died, was dedicated to finding a way to cure cancer. So maybe that could be inside of him. Kurt tells him that it's possible that it could be nothing, but he's not a stupid man. He knows something when he sees it. For a long time, he's been at the end of his rope. But there's hope. And that's why he's here, asking for permission and running the experiments. Peter thinks about it, and Kurt continues saying that they might find nothing. And maybe that's it. But it's almost like they have a responsibility to try. Hearing those words, Peter says, okay, you can run the experiments. 2 months later, Peter heads out to stop Punisher Frank Castle from killing a robber, and he ends up cutting himself in the process. Peter heads over to Kurt's lab to get patched up, and he says that he's looking real good today. Kurt laughs, telling him that they finally got their funding for the year and things have been going well. Peter tells him that's awesome. So about what we talked about before, can I see it? Kurt tells him yeah, but can we do it tomorrow? He's actually on his way to see his kid for dinner. Peter tells him sure, it's fine. He goes on stating that, you know how science nerds get. They get into it and they'll be there for an hour. Peter tells him yeah, he's actually late himself, so he'll stop by again. As Peter leaves, Kurt heads into the next room and tells Ben that he's going to head out, and then he asks how everything's going. Ben says that everything's going smooth, though he thinks that it should be up to 86 degrees. He's a bit worried about the next incubation stage. Ben then gets up, telling him that he's gonna go out for a walk. He needs to get something to eat, and as the two leave, over in the incubation container, a red hand forms, and through the murky liquid, a figure begins to take shape. A little while later, Ben returns back to the lab to see that the test sample has disappeared. He looks around quickly and frantically, and he finds the cap to the container has been removed. He quickly calls up Kurt, asking if he's taken little Ben, and after being told no, he says that they may have been robbed, though he didn't tell anyone about it. Before the two can go on, there's a scream from the lobby, and Ben runs outside. Everyone gathers around looking at something, and then when it reaches them, he sees one of the security guards look as if his insides have been sucked out. Later that night, a couple begins to walk home after seeing a movie, and they notice something hiding in an alley as they're passing it. The man says that whatever it is, it looks hurt, and the woman asks if they should help. The red figure shuffles out, and then it holds out its hand, shooting a red tendril in the man's face. Suddenly, the man's body is forcibly pulled into the alleyway, and as the woman screams, she too is grabbed. She screams for someone to help, but the tendril pulls and drags her into the shadows, and then there's a loud chunk. A few seconds later, after absorbing the nutrients from the couple, the red figure stands up more like a human figure, and it screams! And then the red figure falls to its knees, looking at its hands. Suddenly, the vision of its hand starts to change into Peter's hands, and then memories begin to play. The memories of Peter and all of the things that he's seen and done. The figure screams and starts to mimic itself as Peter when he's in costume, webbing and swinging throughout the city. But there's one flash that stood out, and that was Peter's house. Over at Peter's house, Gwen returns after a day at the mall and realizes that she's forgotten her keys. She heads around the back to see if Peter's in the basement, but as she gets there, she finds that it is also locked. And that's when she hears something behind her. She asks if it's Peter, but without answering, the red figure comes out of the bushes. Gwen says no while trying to back up, but the figure opens its mouth and it grabs a hold of her. Gwen struggles to get free, and then a tendril shoots into her mouth and begins to drain her. Just as Gwen's vision begins to fade, she sees the creature's face begin to form and take Peter's face. The tendril then pulls out of Gwen's stomach and the figure vanishes, leaving Gwen's body in the grass. A short while later, Aunt May returns home from work and begins calling out, asking if anyone's there. With no answer, she figures that she'll just make some food for Peter and Gwen when they get home. And as she looks out at the window into the backyard, she sees Gwen's body. Over at the Daily Bugle, Peter finishes reading the article that Jonah posted that Spider-Man has actually done some good because he stopped the Punisher, and then the phone rings. Peter answers it and tells Aunt May hello, and she tells him what she found. Peter hangs up the phone and he rushes home to see the cops and the EMTs on the scene, and he starts to push his way through the crowd. As he gets to the backyard, he sees Gwen's body covered, and he overhears Aunt May talking to some of the police. As Jean arrives, she speaks with some of the other detectives and says that it's a shame. The same thing happened earlier today at the Empire State University lab. Once all of the police leave, Aunt May tries to get a hold of Gwen's mother, but she isn't having much luck. Mary Jane's mother offers to let Peter and Aunt May stay with the Watsons for the night, and Peter says that might actually be a good idea. Later, as he sits on a fold-out couch, Mary Jane comes down with a pillow asking if he knows who did this. Peter says that he's not sure. He's not even sure if this could be related to him being Spider-Man. Mary Jane leans back, telling him it's awful. She may be the last person to have talked to her. Earlier at the mall, they ran into each other and they had a totally cool talk, like they were really becoming friends. Peter then asks her what's the point of all of this if he can't stop the people around him from getting hurt. As Peter begins to cry, Mary Jane hugs him until he falls asleep. However, a short while later, Peter sits back up thinking about all of the possibilities of who could have done this. The detectives mentioned that it could have been a mutant. So was it Wolverine, Otto Octavius, Norman? And then he remembers something that Jean mentioned. The same thing happened at Empire State University. And then an image of Kurt Connors as the Lizard crosses his mind. He gets up and he looks at the window towards his house, and he sees Kurt standing there. He grits his teeth and he heads outside, punching Kurt, calling him a monster. He jumps on top of him, hitting him, shouting, "What did you do? What did you do to my life?" And as the rage begins to take over, Peter picks Kurt up, and Kurt tries to explain that there was an accident at the lab. Peter sets him down, asking, "What accident?" And Kurt goes on telling him that they inadvertently created a rejuvenating organism and it escaped. Peter shouts, asking him, "What did you do?" And Kurt explains that they were running tests and splicing the DNA with things and none of it was working. So they dug through some of his father's old notes until they found something about cell reconstruction. Peter looks at Kurt, stating, "You spliced my altered DNA using my father's stolen work just to see what would happen?" Kurt remains silent and Peter tells him, "That is the most disgusting thing I could have ever imagined." And then there's a rustle from the bushes. Peter's spider sense begins to go crazy, and then out of the bushes walks the red creature. As it walks forward, its face begins to change, and as its face starts to look like Peter's, it tries to talk. Peter stumbles back shouting, and the creature starts to change back and screams as it shoots a tendril forward. Peter narrowly dodges it, and then he jumps back trying to fight off the creature. He shouts for Kurt to get back to his lab and find a way to kill this thing. But once he's done, if he hasn't found a way to kill it, he's gonna lock the two of them into a room together. Peter grabs a hold of one of the tendrils and he pulls the creature up to a roof to get it away from the people while Kurt speeds off. As the two of them struggle, the fighting brings them into the city where they both crash into different buildings. Peter gets up looking down asking, what has Spider-Man brought into this world? That thing has his face and it's killing people. He's failed at what he's supposed to be doing, and that's help people. As the creature gets up, it looks at Peter and it starts to escape. So he chases after it, and just as the creature lands on a police car, Peter follows shortly after slamming it back down. The creature throws Peter away, and the two officers of the car belonged to open fire. The bullets shoot through the creature, and then it throws two of its tendrils at the officers. Peter gets up and he watches the creature absorbing them, and then it changes again, this time into a much more fully formed body. Back over at the lab, Kurt rushes inside, and as the doors open, he sees Peter's shadow standing there. He asks what happened, and Peter stares at him, telling him, it's done. The creature grew and formed, and we fought. The more that we fought, I started to see its face, and it was my face. It was my father's face. And then there was a moment of hesitation, but deep down I knew what I had to do. So I brought the fight to the smokestacks and threw the creature's body inside. After falling into the fire, the creature tried to pull itself out, but in the end it let go. As Peter finishes the story, Kurt says that he's sorry that he had to, and then Peter grabs him shouting, sorry? He pulls his fist back shouting, you murdered these people, you killed Gwen! But before Peter can hit Kurt, he lets go and silently says, you killed Gwen. A little while later, down at the police station, Kurt walks in and tells the detectives that his name is Kurt Connors, and he thinks he may have accidentally murdered people. Back over at Mary Jane's house, the alarm clock shows 7:42, and Mary Jane wakes up to see Peter just sitting there. She asks if he got any sleep, and then sees his face covered in dirt and scratches. She then asks if he caught the guy who did this, and he tells her yeah. She says that she could have gotten him his costume, and he tells her no more costume, he's done. She then says, done with what? And he says, with Spider-Man, no more. However, back at the lab, Ben arrives for work when he sees the officers going through Kurt's research, and he asks what's going on. The dean of the school says that they're shutting down the lab. The experiments that Kurt was working on is what killed those people. She also regrets to inform him that as of now, he's currently out of a job, so go get his things. Ben heads over and begins to pack, and then he opens up a fridge of test tubes. He pulls one out, and it has a label, Parker Sample Number 2. He tucks it away in his coat, and he closes the container. And that concludes Ultimate Spider-Man for today, guys. Now that Carnage has been introduced into the world, we're going to be jumping around in the later volumes because we're going to be doing things like the Venom fight, the Clone Saga, and introducing important characters so that we can eventually get to the end of the Ultimate Spider-Man saga. But I want to know in the comments down below, because me and Dylan, the guy who edits these videos, were talking about this. Should we do past the ending of the Peter Parker era and do on to Miles Morales? There isn't that many things that we could do for him, but we could do 3 or 4 videos related to what he does after Peter Parker. Or should we just let this end with Peter Parker? Let me know in the comments down below and subscribe to get your Saturday morning Ultimate Spider-Man, and I'll see you next time right here.